Welcome everyone to another edition of the Collaborative Leaders Huddle. I'm Craig Ross with Verus Global. It's very exciting to have you with us here today. Welcome from around the world for those of you who are joining us internationally. Rumor has it, it's a relatively important day in the United States. Of course, today's the election day, which actually is appropriate for us to have the Collaborative Leaders Huddle on election day. From my perspective, because collaboration, democracy, while they're very different, they also have some things in common. And one of the things that they have in common is of course, the fact that a collaborative approach in democracy is about inclusion. It's about participation. It's about people leaning forward and having a voice. And so collaboration and democracy, having those two things in common, we felt it appropriate to take a moment to further equip our network, the collaborative leaders like you, in the work that's so important to you in your leadership. So thank you for joining us for our Collaborative Leaders Huddle on Election Day. And again, a special welcome to those who are joining us internationally. The Collaborative Leaders Huddle, of course, hosted by Verus Global, where we certainly believe that teams that are not aligned fail their customers and employees. And so we rapidly align collaborative teams so that they can consistently succeed. A special edition, I'm eager to get to the introductions for many reasons. First and foremost, though, my teammate and dear friend Cheryl Lynn, who makes the magic happen and does so much for us. Cheryl Lynn, would you please say hello as our moderator, and then some instructions for our participants in the network, please.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Thanks, everyone. I will be fielding questions, and so if you have a question for Craig, Candice, and Marty, and you want to send that to me either privately, and I'll go ahead and read the question for you, or you can just put it in the chat, and when we get to questions, I'll call on you. You can unmute yourself and ask them the question yourself.
Thank you, Cheryl Lynn, and thank you for your important work. I'm excited. You know, this whole idea of the huddle started in February, March, where the pandemic was first hitting, and we were looking for ways to provide more value to the network of collaborative leaders. And I was having some discussions with leaders, these inspired leaders who are just making amazing things happen. And I was thinking to myself, it's such a shame that more people can't participate in these discussions. And so that was the genesis behind the Collaborative Leaders Huddle. As you well know, if you've participated before, it's unscripted. We have one scripted question. We call it the big question. We're going to share that in just a moment. But you're in for a treat, if not a gift, because our two guests today have become dear friends, frankly, and don't get caught up in their big titles. I know those are really impressive titles in front of you, and most of us would long to have that sort of influence. But I got to tell you, beyond these titles, these two human beings are special because of the way that they deliver for their business, for their people, for the market, for customers, and so forth. Their credibility is, of course, obvious as you look at their bios. First and foremost, I want to introduce Candice Long. As you listen to Candice today, you're gonna sense something. She's dedicated to being a student of leadership. And she's transparent, she's vulnerable, she's everything that so many of us want to be. Candice, would you please say hello to the network?
Hi, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Craig.
You got it. Thank you, Candice. And Marty Heckman, I had the opportunity to join and serve Marty's team. And the moment you meet Marty, you're going to know something. The level of caring that Marty brings to her leadership, it just oozes. And she does things that I would like to be able to do as a leader. She blends the caring with a rigor, with an expectation. After you're done with Marty, you just feel stronger and better as a human being. Marty, you're a remarkable human being and leader. Thanks for joining us. Would you please say hello?
Thanks, Craig, and happy to be here. Nice to meet everybody who's joined us today.
Thank you so much. Let's get started. Let's get rolling. Our big question, of course, is how do we create that space for what matters most? I threw our guests, Candice and Marty, a curveball right out of the gate because I said, you know, first we should really identify what does matter most during especially this time of pandemic, civil and social unrest, and so forth. And so, Candice, in your opinion, what does matter most? Where do your thoughts go?
You know, Craig, because we're talking with a lot of folks from different industries, across the globe, as you highlighted, the very first thing is our teams. And then if I broaden it out a little bit more, it's all those that really surround us, given everything that's going on in our world today.
That resonates. Thank you. Our teams, those people around us. Marty, where does your mind go? What matters most?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Craig. And I think in the time where we are today, in the middle of this pandemic, and a number of folks working in different environments than they typically do, the first thing I think about is connecting, and the importance of really having true, authentic connection with folks. That I think that's top of mind for me anyway.
So both those answers mean a lot, I'm sure, to the network as well, because today, of course, so many of us are working virtually. There's some of us going back to work, the office and so forth. Yet we have our teams, as Candice just said, and Marty, you're talking about those human connections. There's no doubt, we're hearing from so many, it's so much more difficult these days. And so, Candice, let's start with you again. How do you create space in the day-to-day for doing that, for connecting with your team?
Craig, I'm smiling. It's like trial and error, right? I mean, if I pause and reflect on what we did initially, personally, what we did with our teams, I think we tried to take what we did in the office home. And honestly, I think many of us were just holding on. If I think back, I heard, to build on Marty's point about connecting, people needed to understand what was happening. They needed the opportunity to share. They needed the opportunity to be heard. And I think through those, we began to learn. So, I think what we found that we need space for is, as Marty said, connecting with each other, with our teams. We still have to find the space to ensure that we are thinking strategically, executionally, and tactically, so that we can change, because it's happening faster than ever. And as many of you, I'm anticipating, are thinking about, I know Marty and I have these conversations regularly, the only reason we deliver anything is because of these great folks that come and work with us every day. So finding ways to help them maintain their energy and establish some type of flexibility, those to me are all things that are critically important.
That makes sense, Candice. And as I transition to Marty to hear her response, it's an aha for me right out of the gates. Of course, we as human beings, as leaders, we attempted to replicate what worked in person immediately virtually. That makes perfect sense. And I think I need to forgive myself for trying some tactics that obviously were not as strong or as effective, and then learning as we go. Thank you, Candice. Marty, your thoughts on our big question?
Yeah, Craig, I think for me, I'm a person that thrives on balance. And so when I think about creating space, I'm also a bit of an introvert. So for me, it has to start a little bit there, in that, I have to manage my own energy in order to be there the way that I want to be for my team. So as I think about balance, it's my own well-being, it's making sure that I'm there for my family, and that they're in a good place, and then also with the team. I lead a large organization, so trying to make sure that I'm available. That's a big priority of mine, to anybody on the team. I have really a very open door policy, and so being available, making those connections, and being present in the moment with them, and making sure that I create the space in order to have those moments.
Marty, I'm going to come back to you on something there. You said, and I paraphrase, of course, it starts with me. I have to create space for what matters most for myself. You referenced that you're an introvert. Do you model that and share that with your team? Do you share what you're going through? Do you talk about how you're creating space for what matters most for you personally?
I do. I think that, I think one thing I've learned through the years, and just in my leadership style, is to be really kind of open and real. And, I don't think that's something, that's who you are. I think if you can show that little bit of yourself, that human side of you, if you can show even those moments of vulnerability, that just makes you a stronger leader, makes you easier for folks to understand and connect and to trust.
That resonates. Candice, let's build on then Marty's words. If we were, I'm just going to be candid myself. Oftentimes I'll run into leaders where in so many words, they'll share that that's difficult for them to do, right? That it could in some ways, even culturally, present a weakness. It could be, it's too personal. Candice, what coaching, because I know you pretty well as well, Candice, I know that you model the same thing Marty does or similar. What coaching or counsel would you have for us as leaders if we're a little bit nervous about being that transparent with our team?
So Craig, as Marty was just sharing, I've had the pleasure of working with Marty. She has been one of the best business partners I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And you know, I think I learned from what she does, right? I had the pleasure of seeing her bring that authenticity and who she is. You know, but I think as a US society, a lot of times we think of vulnerability as a weakness. We don't think about all the benefits that can come. If I could just share maybe a quick story, I can remember individuals, we were in a group setting and it was not related to COVID. Just very briefly from a background perspective, I was raised by a single parent. She did work multiple jobs. I was very fortunate to actually be able to go to college and pursue other things. That's not something I regularly shared, yet when I did, the number of individuals that came up to me afterwards was stunning. And they said I wouldn't have felt comfortable sharing something about my background unless you had. It was very eye-opening for me because it's not how I think I was taught. You know, when you go through education and schooling and master's programs, I think I heard more your business at work and you leave some of those other things aside. So I think my own personal experience seeing individuals like Marty share theirs, sharing it on my own, and then seeing how responsive individuals were, gave me a bit of confidence. Yet I will still say I work on it all the time. I have to remind myself to do it, to not feel as hesitant to share some of those things that feel very, maybe risky is the right word, about what you're doing and how you're managing. You know, the early stages of COVID were really tough. You're just trying to hold things together. Yet once we started to open up, I think we all began to realize a lot of us were dealing with a lot of the same situations and we could help one another.
It makes sense. It makes sense. And I'm going to emphasize just the willingness and ability as collaborative leaders to go first, to have that courage, to be personal and to share and the power of modeling, Marty in this case. And so Marty, we'll come back to you. Thoughts on and counsel you'd have for us as it relates to demonstrating and modeling this approach.
Yeah, well, I'd say first of all, don't let Candice fool you. She's a remarkable leader, and you know, I think one of the things that you know, I remember most about us working very closely together is that, you know, we were there to, and this I think is what's important for leaders too, to support each other, to be each other's biggest fans, to provide counsel and feedback and you know, and also pat each other on the back when you see something inspiring. And I've had a lot of inspiring moments from working with Candice. So, Craig, I'm sorry, I forgot what your question was, but I'll answer that now.
Actually, well, if you did, beautiful, because the answer really resonates. At the end of this, as a reminder for everybody, if you're new to the Collaborative Leaders Huddle, the three of us will finish with our insight in an instant. I'm getting an insight right there. This idea that creating time for what matters most, just the act of being a big fan of those who are on our team, those we're working with, the peers. We don't have to use those words necessarily, but they can certainly feel it in our energy and our action. Being a big fan, that really resonated, Marty. Thank you so much. We're seeing some messages and questions come in from the network. Excited about that. Cheryl Lynn, I see one posted right now. Would you go ahead and read that for us, and we'll see what Marty and Candice have to say in response.
Yeah, I'll actually call on Malik to unmute himself so that he can ask the question.
Oh, perfect.
Hi there. Thank you so much for your insights. It's fantastic. I just wanted to ask, so you know, you've done a really good job of talking about what matters, and that is the people, that's the team, and sort of everything around that in the project. And I work with cross-functional teams quite a bit and try to facilitate them through a lot of different challenges. One of the big, you know, challenges I have is once we get to that place where what matters is evident, then the teams go off and there's all these conflicting priorities with cross-functional teams, regulatory quality, chemistry, engineering, all that. They all have their priorities, their sort of, key objectives for the year that they have to obtain. And it starts to confound, what matters in our meetings. And I've had a difficult time, I'll be honest, I had a difficult time trying to make sure that they maintain, focus on what matters through that. So I was wondering if you can share some of your experiences or tactics that you've used with those types of teams.
Terrific. Malik, thank you so much. Marty, we'll start with you. And Malik, I appreciate you speaking up. I think that question resonates for a lot of us, myself included. Marty, let's hear from you first.
Yeah, Malik, I think it's a great question. And we work in a matrixed organization. So, you're constantly trying to make what's important for you and, maybe key projects you're working on important for somebody else who doesn't have a direct reporting line, actually works in a parallel organization. So I think it's a critical skill to learn and to really master. And, I think in my experience, I try to just have conversations with people. I may have, if it's a team of folks, we may talk about, what our priority is and what matters and what we need to do as a team. But if I feel like there's some critical folks on there that maybe aren't fully enrolled and fully engaged in it, I'll go have a one-on-one conversation with them. And it'll be honestly just about the fact that, hey, Malik, I need you engaged in this. We will not succeed without your input and what you bring to this project, and really just help people understand the important role that they play and how their contribution is going to lead to success. And we will win or fail based on their contribution. And, and I tell people, I'm counting on you. I'll help you take care of obstacles that get in your way, but we're all counting on you.
Excellent. As we transition to Candice, you hear a response. I have to emphasize something that Marty's modeling in front of us, and that's there's a curiosity and a belief that they want to do well. I think that's really important. Sometimes, if I'm not careful, I move to frustration with their miss on the priorities too quickly. And Marty's reminding me that, wow, let's be curious. Let's appreciate the fact that there's a lot going on in their world. And then I love that message. I'm counting on you. Thank you, Marty. Candice, your thoughts?
I'd love to just build on what Marty described. And as Marty shared, Malik, I think we probably all have different individuals that work within the organization. The very first thing that I thought of was, what is our purpose? What are we driving towards? And actually, do we have the same goal? Do we have the same purpose? And seeking to understand that frequently has helped. Just like Marty said, the conversations can be incredibly helpful. Really seeking to understand, I think that's what I was hearing from Marty, is what is it that may be getting in your way? Can you help me understand, why we're going one direction versus another, versus making what could be perceived as judgments, and really inviting them into the conversation. Servant leadership actually comes to my mind right away as well. I was thinking back to a project that I was part of earlier this year, where we had one particular group that was operating differently, and it seemed to be creating a lot of frustration. Yet as soon as we engaged and sought to understand what their actions were driving towards, why they were taking those, and how I personally could help them to achieve those and the purpose, it just seemed to shift the mindset of the group to being much more collaborative, oriented towards that goal. I don't think if I hadn't asked the question of what I can do, how can I help? Marty described, we are counting on you. I'm not confident that that would have been the same outcome. So those are a couple of things that immediately jumped to my mind.
That's fantastic. Thank you both. I really appreciate that. I think the concept of being curious, of going out there, as you mentioned, to go out there and find out what's going on with them and see how we can help. I think that's fantastic. I love that. I'll definitely be using it. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Malik. Appreciate that. Probably some of us have seen this, as most people know, in times of crisis, leaders are encouraged to do what? Over communicate And it's my personal opinion as we serve organizations around the world. I think we're obviously we know we're well into this crisis of the pandemic, yet we're still seeing organizations practice the over communication. And so it is our responsibility, Malik. I appreciate you speaking up as collaborative leaders to help people facilitate and process that information. One of the questions I'd like to add to Candice's list there of questions we can ask is what is your course of action when you feel like you are stuck between competing priorities? What will you do after you leave this meeting? If you find you're in a position of competing priorities, what's your course of action? And I encourage us to actually facilitate that awareness so we can support not only ourselves, but our colleagues, of course, in what actions they'll take. Malik, thanks for speaking up. Cheryl Lynn, I want to come back to you. Do we have additional questions from the network, private or otherwise?
Yes, we do have a private question that I'll just go ahead and read. The question is, how do you encourage your teams to build relationships while still meeting pressing needs of the business?
Got it, okay. Makes sense. It's a go, go, go world. We're supposed to build relationships even virtually now, but we have pressing needs in the business. Candice, let's start with you and then we'll go to Marty on this one. Where do your thoughts go? What are some things you're doing that's working for you?
So Craig, this question's making me smile because in the midst of everything that's been going on, I actually transitioned to a new position within the organization and have completely different teams that I'm now working on versus the ones I was working with before. And while I know many of them, having worked within the organization, it became really important, I think, that I established those relationships. So the very first thing I would say is, Marty started off with this idea of connections. And honestly, that's where I started, was there are a lot of different things going on, yet without me getting a chance to know individuals and building those relationships, getting a bit of an opportunity to know them deeper than just the work that they're accountable for or their title, I questioned whether I could have as much impact. And so I did spend quite a bit of time getting to know individuals throughout the new organization that I was part of, hopefully allowing them the opportunity to get to know me, hearing about some of their thoughts about where our opportunities were and the strengths that we had within our organization to deliver against those. And through those conversations with some intent, focusing in on those critical few things that I was aware we needed to do over the course of not only 2020, but going into 2021. So I was transitioning as somebody else exited. So I had spoken to that person about what some of those near-term priorities. So I had a little bit of knowledge, but then built upon those knowledge with the conversations, as well as where I envisioned us moving forward. From a J&J perspective, we are also working towards some ways of addressing the pandemic that we're living in right now as well. So we had an unexpected add in the middle of some of the work that we were doing, yet those relationships, at least from my perspective, were really at the core, and making the decision, I would say up front on the time, was critical.
That, as we transition to Marty and Candice, of course, you acknowledge that you transitioned to a new role. So if you reach out to me and we spend 30 minutes, an hour on the phone, it's going to be natural. I'm going to realize, yeah, you're connecting with me. I really appreciate that you emphasize that you prioritize that. And so then Marty, what advice would you give for us as leaders if come on, it's go, go, go. We got business to talk about. You're not in a new role. How do you bake in that personal connection if there's go, go, go? We got demands to meet and deliver on.
Yeah, Craig, I have to tell you, I have trouble separating the two. I think they're so intertwined that you get business done because of relationships and with relationships. So for me, it's really, I think, going back to Candice's comments, it starts with the relationship. And if it's a relationship you've had in place, I think it's going and and helping that person understand the business, what the business need is, and what we need to do. If it's someone you don't have a relationship with, my personal belief is you have to at least begin that journey of building a relationship with them. Do some homework, get to know them, let them get to know you, and then get down to business. You will make up the time and have greater success, I think, if you invest in the relationship.
It resonates. I'll never forget, this is several years ago when, of course, a lot more work was in person. I was shadowing a team, and there were several different leaders. It was a cross-functional meeting, and the individual leading the meeting, I think they allowed for something like 7 or 8 minutes of, I think, what a lot of people call small talk. People were talking about what they did in the weekend, and they were laughing and so forth. And then the leader of the meeting said, "Okay, let's get down to business." And another individual who I now know was a mentor of the person who was leading that meeting said, "Actually, let me clarify, those first 8 minutes, this is your business as a leader. It's for us to connect as human beings. This is your job as a leader." And that made such an impression on me, Marty and Candice, because I realized that I sometimes I can think of it as small talk, like it's less important. And Marty, you're reminding us it's actually, no, it's really, it's got to go on all the time.
Yeah, agree. Great. I mean, one of the things I'm working with my leadership team is on caring first. And when I posed that idea to my team, you know, they had trouble getting their head around what that actually meant. You know, does that mean I need to hug my teammates? And it you know, it's not about that at all. It is about what we just talked about. It is about taking the time to ask them how their weekend was, taking the time to give them feedback that, you know, may not be easy, but it's something that they need to hear. All of that is about caring, and I think fits right into you know, what we're talking about.
Got it.
Craig, if I could add one quick thing to what Marty just described, the authenticity of those questions about caring first has really come through with the pandemic that we're living in. As a US culture, it's very common for us to ask, "How you doing?" but we don't actually look for the answer. Yet we actually have stopped and we've begun to listen. And hopefully we're understanding a little bit more about what people's lives are like, what they're trying to manage. And it provides a connection in a way that we didn't have before. It allows people to understand at a slightly different level who we are. And as a result, I think we are more productive when I think, Marty, maybe one of the outcomes of caring first is you're trusting in a way that you haven't necessarily trusted. And I don't know that we would have gotten there, as odd as it may sound, without the situation we're dealing with right now.
For the network, I just want to reinforce, you probably see it. I want to reinforce our job is to give as much value as possible. What I see Marty and Candice reminding us of is, as leaders, it's really important, I think, in the right situation to articulate why the conversations we're having are important. And so whether it's about a personal comments, you know, what we used to call small talk, whether it's a discussion around a debate we're having as a team, a difficult decision, maybe there's a conversation that's very sensitive that's occurring, but as collaborative leaders, our job to remind people, reinforce why this conversation is important, why this matters. And of course, several leaders, I recognize names here. I know what many of you do. You might even ask the team, why is this conversation important? Why did we just dedicate 10 minutes in this meeting with everything we have to do? Why did we just dedicate 10 minutes? And so whether we're articulating or asking our team, that becomes very important. Marty, I'll start with you and then Candice, and then we'll go back to our network. What other suggestions would you have, tips, as it relates to keeping a team focused on what matters? I'll go back to our big question, if you will. What else has come to mind for you or you've seen as best practices?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think one of the things that drew me to the healthcare industry is the impact that you can have on people's lives and on their health. And that's honestly why I think I have such high appreciation for the people that I work with, because they have a sort of a common purpose that we can all share in that, you know, we have seen how the solutions that we deliver on, how it can absolutely change somebody's life. It can help somebody actually go on a vacation and spend a holiday with their family. You know, it can give them, in some cases we've seen it just gives them their life back. So I think grounding in that common purpose is a way that I've really tried to focus our team. We try to put the patient first in everything that we do, and having passion for that, and so makes my job easy. All I have to do is continue to throw some Kindle on that passion, knowing that we're all focused on that North Star with being the patient. And so I think if you can find something in your business where you can find that common purpose, I think that can help to drive that focus that you need.
That's huge. Candice, as you build on Marty's thoughts, a slight variation of the question for you. Sometimes as a leader, I worry about being a broken record. Purpose, motivation. Yet the two of you always show up so consistently, and it always seems so refreshing. It doesn't seem like a broken record. How do you do what Marty's talking about without being a broken record? Keeping us focused on purpose, keeping us tapping into motivations. How do you do that?
So one of the most effective ways that we selected to do it actually came from the folks that I got a chance to work with. They came forward with an idea, which was, as we started some of our larger team meetings, would it be possible for individuals that maybe aren't always in the front of the room sharing why what they're doing contributes to our ability to deliver against a purpose or objective? Over time, Craig, it was amazing to see the passion come through that you just heard from Marty in their words, not necessarily scripted. It became less about the role and more about the actions that they were able to take, the choices that they made, but providing that ability for individuals to share how the work they're doing directly aligns. Everything else kind of stemmed from that. It was a wonderful way, and then it created, again, connections for individuals to say, yes, I feel the same way. I've had a similar experience. They work across teams, but maybe they hadn't spoken before. So it was a wonderful employee-driven, idea in terms of the purpose, the objective of what we're doing. I think there's also an immense level of pride for all of our groups when they are meeting and delivering against that purpose. If we can find the way for those individuals to be reminded that what they're doing daily contributes, that the actions they take will absolutely have a positive effect. Personally, I've found that to be immensely valuable.
Candice, you're reminding me of why I personally need this network of collaborative leaders, because all too often I think I work too hard. I see other leaders working so hard, like we've got to have the magic saying, the right story, the right phrase, and you're reminding us, wow, empower others to bring forth their brilliance, activate their hearts and minds, mobilize their hearts and minds, and wow, it's a win-win-win. Such an important reminder. Thank you. Cheryl Lynn, I want to come back to you. I've got another question for our incredible guests here, but I want to tap into our network. Do you have additional questions for us?
Yes, I did get another one that is private, so I'll go ahead and read it. The question is, with so many working from home or even transitioning back to the office, what are some techniques or advice that you have for juggling things like kids or interruptions?
Got it. All right. This resonates as well. Thank you, Cheryl Lynn. There's a lot going on. We've got 4 kids in the Ross household right now. It's kind of crazy. Marty, Candice, I'll start with you this time. Your thoughts. I know you're an incredible mother as well. What advice do you have for us?
So I'm smiling because actually I have one of those live interruptions happening as we speak. That was not planned. We have folks that showed up.
Camera go off.
Yeah. So unexpectedly, the folks that are doing some work in our house showed up.
That's so great.
My husband came in just off camera and said, hey, they're here. So what do you want to do? And I said, I'm just going to try to relocate and mute myself to try to avoid as many disruptions. But honestly, my husband and I are both working full-time remotely. We have 2 children, a 7th and 9th grader. And while I think we were holding on in the spring, just trying to make sure that we all went to our 4 corners and did what we needed to do, we made a lot of changes. I think we recognized what was working and what wasn't. We had conversations as a family. I talked with the folks that I was working with. And so honestly, I think the first and foremost thing I would say is I've created a lot of clarity for the individual I work with, who I'm reporting to, and for my teams as to how my days have shifted, where I'm available, how they can get in touch with me. I've tried to provide as much clarity on when I'm not available and why I'm very open. 5 to 6 is a tough time for us as a family because our children have activities. And so I do need to shut down to make sure they've eaten and we get them to wherever they're going between my husband and I, and then I'm available. So there's been a tremendous amount, I think, of sharing, of understanding in terms of what our days look like. I would also say that I've prioritized on both sides. So there have been situations where I've shared with my family, I really need this time to focus in on what I'm doing from a work perspective, just as I've done it on the personal side. The more that's shared, I think, again, going back to an earlier conversation, it creates the willingness for others to share their situations, what adaptations we can make. And quite honestly, Craig, I make mistakes. I try to acknowledge those really quickly and learn from those as rapidly as possible, both professionally and personally, so that I can, continue to find new ways, and hopefully it works better for everyone involved.
An important reminder, the antidote for chaos or ambiguity is clarity. And so even though things are so uncertain right now, where do we have clarity? And as a collaborative leader, ensuring we have a shared reality around that. Thank you, Candice. Marty, your thoughts in response to our question?
Yeah, it's a good question, Craig. And, I have a very large sales organization. So, I have had many nights over the last 8 months just thinking about making sure that I do the right thing for them, and for the business. And it's not easy, I don't think, as a leader at all times. But I think that for me, it has been probably for priority one has been sort of around safety. We can't keep people 100% safe, but we can absolutely minimize risk. And, so I think that's an important thing as you think about your teams. And then I think, what has, if I had to pick a word for 2020, that word would probably be empathy. I think having, making sure you have an understanding of what each individual on your teams, what their situation is, and being empathetic to that. How can you put some flexible work arrangements in place to make sure that you're doing the right thing for the people and for the business. And then I think to Candice's earlier comments, I think just what we've all lived through over the last few months, I think it's made us all a little more human too, and made our connections even stronger. At least that's what I'm seeing within our team. It's not unusual to be on a call with somebody and see their baby sitting on their lap, or having the kids get home from school and they come barging into the room, and I actually love that. I think it's helped all of us to really strengthen our connections with each other and to understand that there's a lot going on in our lives beyond work. And I think given us all sort of a better, broader appreciation of that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The two of you, as always, inspire me. Your thoughtfulness, the meaningfulness in your words and the way that you lead means a lot to me. I'd like to, I can't speak on behalf of the network, but I do have to share that as we work with leaders around the world, that it seems to me, and I'm culpable of this, that we're still looking for that, what do they call it? The silver bullet, right? The elixir, what are people doing, right? That's gotten us back to the same feeling we had as it relates to focusing on what matters when we worked in person. And I'd love your thoughts on this, but my opinion is nobody's found it. It's a new world, and I'd like to speak a little bit to the resilience, the perseverance that's going to be required, because as we listen to experts, it's not as if the pandemic is going away. It's not as if we're not facing economic uncertainties as we move forward. If the folks that I'm listening to and following, we're looking at going well into 21 on this. And so, first of all, I'd like to know, is that consistent with your thinking, or is there an elixir out there? to get back to that feeling of connectedness? And if not, what are maybe there's a summarizing question. What are some trends? What if you had to bank on 2 or 3 things then to create that perseverance, the resilience for teams as we move into 21? What should we be thinking about right now? Marty, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you with our field organization, Craig, we've been trying to break it down into quarters, and you know, and trying to put some milestones in there that people can see. It's not going to take us a long time to get there, you know, and so we put sort of that quarterly milestone out there, and we try to give clarity for the next 3 months. You know, this is where we're going to focus. This is going to be our approach. These are going to be our priorities. And then I think a big thing on resilience is just continuing to remind your teams on the agility it's gonna take, you know, for the long haul. But I do think putting those milestones out there where you can get some, you know, and celebrate those, probably even more importantly, is you know, give them the opportunity to, you know, I have a sales organization. They like to set goals, they like to achieve those goals, and they like to be recognized for it. So that's what we've tried to build that into, you know, what we're doing today.
Smart, and a good reminder for myself, perhaps others. Most of us are well into our 21 planning, but as collaborative leaders, being mindful of you know, shortening some of those milestones be really critical. A quarter by quarter approach. Thank you, Marty. Candice, how about you?
So I actually wrote down a note on the quarter by quarter, because that's actually something I'm going to see if I can't maybe think a little bit more specifically about within the group that I'm working in. You know, I think a couple of immediate words that came to mind were also building, you know, empathy. You'd heard from Marty earlier. And, you know, when I think about resilience and perseverance, there's a couple of things that I think back to. The first is, you know, do we know the principles that are going to be most important for our teams and ourselves as we continue moving forward? So in working with Marty, one of the things that we did in the business that we were a part of was just pause and reflect on what we had learned over the course of the first 4 weeks or so of the pandemic. We characterized 4 key principles within our group to say this is what we were working towards. They were things such as, you know, listen first. Truly put the customer at the center. I think often we think we are, until a situation like this arises where our customers say, my need today is, and they're getting extremely explicit. So we had a couple of these core principles about empathy, about listening, about really driving less as much as possible. And then the other thing that stood out for me is how hard it was for many of our teams, and it will again, to be agile. I think we all reference the fact that agility is something that we need. But in the midst of chaos, Craig, clarity is hard to get your hands on. And the plan you created feels clear, yet everything around you tells you you need to change. Those two fight one another pretty aggressively. And so how do we, one, acknowledge with our teams the need for the perseverance, the need for the resilience? That means that some of the activities we had planned need to change for the right reasons. How do we celebrate that willingness to make those pivots for the right reasons? And then keep those celebratory moments, as you heard from Marty, as we keep moving forward. The moments of celebration may not be the way that we had initially thought they'd be, yet they're no less valuable. The moments of celebration, you know, can be that someone actually made the decision to block an hour every week to think, and it's productive. It's leading them to new ideas or suggestions. That moment of celebration could be that they found a way to collaborate on a project that was important, despite the challenges of all of us working remotely. And so those moments maybe aren't numbers. They may be more about the relationships, the connections, and the choices that we're making on a regular basis.
Wise words, Candice, and reminding me that while I'm so eager to be done with 2020 in so many different respects, just reminders, collaborative leaders, 2020 will be definitely a year to remember. And our job as collaborative leaders to facilitate that discussion around principles. What have we learned about ourselves? What are our principles that are more meaningful than ever, especially as it relates to, of course, success in 21. Got one final question for you as we round out our time. I think we might have to come up with a new slogan for the Huddle. It's the fastest 50 minutes in the history of humankind, because these discussions go way too quick. I'll ask for your brief answers in this one. I'm quite curious, as always, as you move through this process, what are you learning about yourself as a leader? As you think about 2020, if you'd candidly share and be vulnerable, what have you learned about yourself as a leader? I'm putting you on the spot, it's a personal question. I know how the two of you roll, so thank you for allowing this. And then we'll wrap things up after we've heard your responses. Candice, would you mind going first on this one?
Sure. So I think the first thing that I learned is that I do prefer non-chaotic environments where we have given some thought to the actions and how we anticipate moving forward. Yet, as odd as it will sound, I find energy in the moment where we need to come together in very distinct and unique ways. Myself personally, I have found attributes that I had not anticipated, and I'm pleasantly surprised by those. I've also found a few things that I want to work on that I probably wouldn't have seen without this circumstance. So despite the fact it has definitely been a very unique year, as you just described it, I think I've learned more about myself since March than in any other year.
Thank you, Candice. Your mindset of gratitude always appeals to me. Thank you. Marty, how about you?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing for me is around time. And I have a bit of a commute to our home office that I have not missed, and it's about an hour and a half each way. So I've gotten 3 hours of time back in my day, and it has allowed me to slow down, to go fast. And that's probably the biggest thing that I think that I've learned through this thing, is just, we put so many things into our day, and we probably only need maybe a quarter of it to get the same amount accomplished. And so that's been sort of my personal epiphany.
Beautiful, Marty. Yeah, thank you. Words to reflect on for sure. Resonates as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll wrap things up here in just a moment with Insights in an Instant. We'll be asking everybody to participate on that. The most significant insight, an aha, a new thought, or a reminder of something important to you. At Veris Global, one of the things that we learned, there's a saying out there, you don't know how strong you are until you have to be strong. And for those of you who've known Veris Global, we have a program called Pathways to Leadership that for roughly, I think, 21 years and 4 months, people said could never be done virtually. Well, along comes a little pandemic, and never say never. And so it's been through the Pathways Leadership process that we've had the opportunity to meet leaders like Marty and Candice. So it's a real thrill. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that as you do your planning for 21 and developing and scaling the collaborative leadership you need to execute your strategies, priorities, and plans. Other resources that are available to you, of course, you can find on our website, the Do Big Things book, a lot of the tools and concepts that Marty and Candice have used in their work, the Connected Focus videos, YouTube, and other places. Of course, I love the conversations within LinkedIn and the leadership blog. I always appreciate the feedback and thoughts through the thousands of leaders who utilize that as a resource. Our next collaborative leadership huddle is going to be in January. Haven't picked a topic on that. I always love the ideas that we get from the network. And so if you've got a question, a big question in mind, please send that to us at Veris Global, myself personally, if you'd like, as well as leaders, inspired leaders like Candice and Marty. If you know leaders like the two of them that you think would be great guests, by all means, I'd love to know about them. All right, Insights in an Instant. I love for our network to participate as well. You can do that in the chat space. I'm going to start, and the reason I do is because I don't want to be the last one who speaks. The brilliant wisdom of our guests that I want you to finish with. My insight is is it started at the very beginning, put a lot of pressure on myself to get it right, to get back to that feeling like we had when we were in person. And Candice, you sparked some words, and then Marty, you reinforced it with this element of time, and really letting go of having to replicate and instead explore and discover what's new. I'm going to maintain that focus. That was my insight in an instant. That's going to serve me as we move forward. Candice, would you mind sharing your insight in an instant?
Like Craig, I think the conversation just reinforced how valuable listening is, rather than assuming we know the answer, particularly with all the change. So listening first will probably give us the strongest way to achieve and deliver against the purpose that it sounds like many are operating within.
Yes, age-old wisdom, but I need that reinforcement. Listening first. Thank you, Candice. Marty.
Yeah, I think for me, Craig, I'm hanging on the word resilience. Again, only because I know that we're coming toward the end of the year and about to kick off a new one, and that's usually a transfer of energy and giving folks a little bit of time at the end of the year to kind of re-energize. And so for me, it's just the need to think about resilience and think about how to bring that to my team.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Marty. And thank you to Candice and Marty for being our esteemed and, as always, inspired guests on the Collaborative Leaders Huddle. Your work in the world means a lot to me personally, and to literally the thousands of people, probably millions, knowing the work that you do at Johnson & Johnson & Jensen. So thank you so much for taking the time and contributing to our network. Thank you to everybody in the Collaborative Leadership Network. We'll see you again in January for our next huddle. Remember, leadership matters, but only teams deliver. Make sure you vote. Participation matters. Thanks, everybody.